Welcome to All Things Retreat Podcast. I'm Holly Porter, your host and CEO of Retreat R&R. With over 25 years of experience in designing transformative retreats, I'm here to share insights and inspiration to help you create extraordinary experiences. Whether you're a pro or just starting out, you'll find valuable ideas here. Enjoy the ride. Let's dive in. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today on the show. We are going to be talking about a great topic about resistance. And I have Kam Knight. He's a mentor, international speaker, and best-selling author of a dozen books in the area of mental, emotional, and physical performance. He's known for being bringing fresh solutions and insights that are a rare departure from traditional ideas. Because of his fresh perspective, his books have become the gold standard for the respective topics, which have helped over 500,000 people. When he's not coaching or writing, he is traveling, having traveled to over 40 countries around the world. Welcome to the show. Yeah. That's a lot of countries. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. I think you said 40, but it's 100. So.
Oh, if I said 40, I meant 100. I was reading 100. Oh, pardon me. Yeah. It's okay. Now, how many countries are there? I thought there was only about 126 or.
It seems like that. There's about 190 some countries. And the reason I use 90 some, because certain countries aren't recognized as countries, but they recognize themselves. And so there are some kind of interesting nuances going on there. For example, there was that conflict with Serbia and Kosovo. Well, Serbia doesn't recognize Kosovo, but Kosovo is recognized as a country. In Moldova, there's a place called Trispol that the world doesn't recognize, but I think the Eastern Bloc nations do recognize it.
Oh.
And so there isn't a hard number, but it's in the 190s.
Wow. I used to thought I knew because I was part of Rotary International and we would do conferences and we would hang at the international conferences. All the flags were there. It was really awesome to see. I loved it.
Yeah.
I love the diversity. Well, gosh, that's a lot of traveling. How many years have you done that many countries over?
It was about a good 6-year stretch where I just traveled and I just went from one country to another. And at a certain point, I had visited the countries that are kind of on most people's lists.
Yeah.
And then once I got there, I started going to uncharted territory. And I've been to places, like I said, Moldova, Trispol, Lithuania, Latvia. And when I meet somebody from those countries, and I'll be like, oh, I've been there. And they give me this surprised look, like, what were you doing there? Because either it's small, unknown, or it's really out of the way. So people are pretty shocked by it. And it's been a really good experience. In fact, it has really shaped a lot of my content and information in the books, as well as my courses, as well as my one-on-one work. A lot of it really stems from my experiences through traveling.
Wow. Did you mostly go for work or was this just for travel, just to travel?
It was just to travel. So I've gone through 3 phases, or maybe I would say 4 phases in my career. The second phase, I was an author, and now I teach internal resistance, what we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
And then after that, I'm doing emotional work now. We're doing one-on-one. But when I was an author, I could write from anywhere. All I needed was a computer with a word processor, and I didn't even really need an internet connection while I was writing, only afterwards. So more or less, I could be anywhere. And so I took that opportunity to go and be anywhere. And if I wanted, I still could maintain that traveling lifestyle or the vagabond lifestyle. But after 100 countries, you see it all, and it does wear you out. In fact, I remember when I was near the last 80, 90, or 100 countries, I would go to some amazing places, see some amazing cities and epic sites, and literally I felt nothing. Like, I think all the dopamine from the 6 years prior had depleted everything. So I couldn't even, really enjoy or take in what the history and the culture and the actual site could offer. And by about the 6th year, though, what's really interesting is it became a habit. It ingrained in me as a process that I just did. I would wake up in the morning. Oftentimes I didn't know when I would wake up what city I was going to be in or what country. It was
Wow.
really that liberating in traveling that way. So my process was, I'd wake up, I would decide if I wanted to stay in that city, figure out what city I was going to go to, how I was going to get there, if I was going to skip to another country, was I going to fly, book flights, book hotels. And it became this habituated process where I just did it. And so by
Wow.
year 4, 5, and 6, it was just something I just did. And I didn't realize I was actually doing it habitually. I still thought I was making a decision to do it. But when I got to the 80, 90 country and I knew I didn't want to do it anymore and I couldn't stop doing it, is when I realized it was a habit. And um, the way I broke that habit is like I said, maybe the last 15 countries, I really pushed it and I went really hard and I really went far and I really went fast. So I just like more or less exhausted and burnt myself out. And,
Yeah.
and after that, it was really my 97th country where I just didn't care to travel anymore. And then, through work and with what I do, I've gone to a few more where I broke through the 100 barrier. But my
Yeah.
goal wasn't initially to break the 100 because I knew if I broke the 100, my mind would go, why don't you do 110? Or why don't you do 120?
Oh, right.
And so before I hit the 100, I'm like, I'm going to stop. And I stopped, as I described, more or less burning myself out. And really, I haven't had much of a calling to travel. And when I do travel now, it doesn't have that excitement and that novelty when it did for me when I was doing it. So, yeah, like now I'm at a place where I like to be stationary and be around nature and do my thing in a much more local fashion.
Have you been to any of the countries more than once?
That was one of the things I tried not to do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's one of the ways it's easier to travel to that many places
Sure.
because if we go back to places more than once, like I know people who have a vacation destination, whether it's in the Caribbean
Yeah.
or whatever, and they go back maybe once or twice a year. Now, if they did pick a different spot and did that in over 10 years, they probably would have gone to 20 different countries.
Yeah.
So that was a thinking that I had. Don't go back to a place more than once. But there were certain places that did call me back a few times. And one of them is Colombia. When people ask me what's your favorite country, I usually give them a top 5, and
Yeah.
Colombia usually ranks as number 1 just because the people at the time were just so welcoming and nourishing, just like being around and talking to them. They
Yeah.
had this thing in them that I just felt like I was being nourished just in their presence. And I've been back to Colombia a good half a dozen times. But outside of Colombia, I can't say I've been to too many countries multiple times. I ended up going to Paris a few times,
Okay.
and not because I wanted to, but just because of the logistics. I
Yeah.
ended up that happening, and I'm trying to think if there's any other countries.
Well,
It's
what's your
actually
other top five, four?
yeah. So the top 5 are Ethiopia, um, Turkey, New Zealand, Venezuela, and number 1 is Colombia. And the
Wow.
top 5 are on there for many reasons. It's the history, the culture, the people, just the sights to see, the nature. But New Zealand is on the top 5 for only one reason, and it's the nature. And the
Mm,
reason I say that is nature is beautiful.
yeah.
And there are some amazing and epic places around the world where people, if they saw it, they'd just be like, this is amazing. But
Yeah.
New Zealand is just a notch higher than anywhere else that I've ever seen. And so New Zealand made the top 5 strictly for nature, and that was it. Whereas the others was a combination.
Yeah. None of those countries that you mentioned are the top 10 of the report that I just did for like top destinations
Uh,
for retreats. So that's interesting. None of
yeah,
them were on there, none of those countries, but
yeah. But
um,
mind you, this was a while ago when I was traveling, so
yeah.
things have changed. I was recently back in Colombia a few months ago after not having been there for 6 years. And
Okay.
when I first went there was almost, I don't know, 12, 13 years ago.
Hmm.
And back then is way different than it is now. I don't think I
Wow.
would put Colombia even in the top 5 anymore, let alone top 1. But
Wow.
it was when I was there.
Yeah. Things
And
change. Yeah.
yeah, and then
And
Venezuela,
really,
go ahead.
things have really changed since COVID everywhere. There's
Yeah.
just the way people handled things in different places because the whole world suffered at the same time. And yeah,
Yeah.
there's so that's interesting that yeah, they probably wouldn't be your favorites anymore. But you know what? You're different now, and
Yes.
you've changed over those last 6, 7 years, and so or 10 or 12 or whatever it's been total since you were
Yeah.
there. I think as we shift in our lives, we just see things differently, and as we age, different things become more important to us, and
Yeah.
what we love and what we resist. So let's get into
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll
Resistance.
get to, yeah. So I'll talk a little bit about resistance. Um, so most of my life, I've been a fairly driven individual. And although I've had my fair share of success, I always felt like I either missed the mark or the success was more difficult and stressful than it needed to be. And
Mm,
I wondered why that was. Why is it if I want to do something, I know what to do, I know how to do it, and I have the motivation, desire to do it, but for one reason or another, I can't or don't do it. You know, you
yeah,
hear me talking about my travels, I can make it, the way I talk, it made it seem like it was a natural process for me. But
yeah,
no, I had a lot of resistance, especially in the beginning. And then my resistance changed as I went to different countries. Like if I had gone to a country no one talked about, there was a lot of resistance going there. And so that question lingered in my mind for the last 15 to 20 years in various capacities, whether it was in school, whether it was in my career, whether it was as an author or making a transition, it would show up. And there weren't a lot of clear answers at the time for why the resistance was showing up. The best answers I was hearing related to beliefs, that you needed to have positive beliefs. And although beliefs are part of the equation, they're really a small piece of a much larger puzzle.
mm,
And the more books I read, coaching I did, and seminars I attended, the more I learned about the complexities of the human brain. And what I didn't know at the time is my mind unconsciously was taking all this information and processing it in the background.
yeah,
And at one moment, I had this epiphany where I was like, oh, wow, there's a part of our brain designed to hold us back. There's a part of our mind built to keep us from growing and making progress. And I call this part resistance. And it's this brick wall that we hit anytime that we want to do something, but we can't, no matter how much we want to do it. And I just want to add that resistance comes up for everyone. You know, it came up for me, it can come up for people who do retreats, and even the clients of the retreats. And
yeah,
so it is a topic that almost no one can escape from.
yeah. What do you think um, when resistance shows up, like let's say at a retreat or an event, we can use that as well. What are the most common ways do you think that it shows up once people get there and relax into something? What do you think the most common
Yeah.
resistance is? What's it for? Or two?
Yeah. So to answer that question really helps understand how resistance work. And then
Yeah.
I'll get into that. So the part of the brain that creates desires actually works separate from the part that allows us to act on the desire. So we have one part of the brain that's creating wants, and in many ways, it's creating endless wants one after another. Now, this part of the brain wasn't designed to see if a want was achievable, worth going after or pursuing. Its
Mm,
only job is to create wants. And in many ways, it's cranking out endless wants one after another at a pace faster than anyone can achieve. And I'm sure
mm,
many of us have experienced that.
yeah.
And then we have another part of the brain that actually checks and evaluates the want to see if it's worth pursuing and going after. And if this part doesn't give the green light, we can't act. So, what's really key is to know that it's possible for the brain to both create a desire for something and at the same time keep us from going after it. In fact, for a long time, I used to think whoever created humanity must have been really sick and twisted, because how could they do this to us? How could this create all these wants
Yeah.
and keep us from going after it and having us sit in that pain? But it makes sense when you come after it from this perspective. So it's
Yeah.
possible for someone to have a want to either go into as a profession in retreats or be an attendee, have a
Right.
desire because the desire says, oh, this will be nice, this will be fun. And then all of a sudden resistance kicks in and starts saying, no, I don't want to do it. Maybe this will happen, or that, and things of that nature. Now, why resistance shows up, it's kind of interesting because, as I mentioned, anytime a desire comes up, it's evaluated by resistance using a host of criteria. And there are many criteria that resistance will evaluate. And if the decision is not in line with any of them, it will prevent action. So in this case, what I would suspect is something that I experience is a lot of times resistance shows up when it's processing all the things that can go wrong. And
Yeah.
here's what I mean by that. So, as I mentioned, I've traveled to over 100 countries. And as I also mentioned, that wasn't the case. I had resistance to traveling. In fact, I was afraid to travel on my own, and I was always trying to get people to come with me. And then when I dove in to the cause of the resistance, I realized that my brain was processing all the things that could go wrong. What if I buy the wrong flight, book it for the wrong date? What if I have to cancel and can't get a refund? What if I can't make the airport? Or what if I miss the flight and can't get a refund? What if I forget to pack something important? Or what if when I arrive there, I'm pickpocketed, robbed, or the hotel isn't nice? So anytime we set out to do something, the brain will process all these what if scenarios. And what's crazy is it doesn't tell us what it's processing. It doesn't tell us that this is why resistance is coming up. It just creates this impenetrable wall that we can't push through, or it creates this feeling where we just can't move through it.
Yeah.
And the more things that can go wrong and the more severe those things are, the outcome, the more resistance will arise. And so this could be one cause of resistance for somebody who is either traveling or going on a retreat, because their brain is processing all these what if scenarios, and it's not telling the person what all the scenarios is processing. It's just processing it, and it's deciding if things can go wrong and how severe the outcome would be if it did go wrong. And it's going, this is too dangerous of a thing to do. And so it creates resistance. I hope
Yeah.
that made sense.
Yeah, no, that totally does. What do you think emotionally or physically, what do you think someone in resistance is going to feel? Like, how would someone recognize it?
Yeah, so what's interesting is resistance manifests many ways. One is they actually don't feel anything. They just don't feel a desire to move forward with that decision.
Yeah.
So they have a desire like, oh, this retreat would be good to go to. And they just don't take action on it. Other times, it feels like they're trying to push through an invisible wall. Like they want to do the thing, and the action's right in front of them. They just have to sign up, book the flight, get on the flight, and so on, but they're not able to do it. Other times, it feels like this much stronger impenetrable wall where they can actually feel the force. Other times, it shows up as fear. There's just a lot of fear and anxiety. And again, they don't know why the fear and anxiety is coming up. And I do want to say that it can come up because the mind is processing all the things can go wrong, but it can come up for other reasons. Remember, there's that criteria. And the most devious way that resistance shows up is what I call tricks of resistance. As I mentioned, when resistance stops us from doing something, it doesn't tell us it's stopping us. It doesn't say, hey, Holly, I know you want to go to Costa Rica for this retreat, but we're afraid, or because of this, I can't let you do it. It doesn't say that. It shows up in these ways I described. But it can also show up in what I call the tricks, where we can get into a heightened sense of over planning. We'll start planning all the things that we should do and how to do it and the best way to do it. And because we spend all our time planning, we're not actually taking action.
Right.
And since we're not taking action, resistance wins. We can also get into a heightened sense of perfectionism, where we try to perfect in everything, where we cross all our T's and dot all our I's. And all the time we spend on doing that keeps us from moving forward, and resistance wins. But it can also show up in things like criticism. So let me ask you a quick question. Have you ever criticized, so you saw something or saw someone having something and you kind of criticized that? Like people who have that are so-and-so, or people that drive that car must be like that.
Oh, yeah. Unfortunately.
Yeah, we all do it. But what's really interesting to know is usually when we criticize something is because we want the thing. We don't usually criticize things we don't want. But because resistance feels like we can't have it or doesn't want us to go after it, it'll put the barrier by criticizing it, saying, oh, People who do that are stupid. And
Yeah.
boom, you
Yep.
you say you make yourself think you don't want it, or the brain makes you think that you don't want it. It creates a barrier, and you don't even think about moving forward. It can also show up for people going on a retreat. They might say, "Oh, that retreat is stupid," or "It's not going to be helpful," or "People who go on those things are
Yeah.
so and so," and bam, they've just created a barrier to pursuing that desire because they've just
Yeah.
made it seem unpleasant or not
Right.
pursuing, and that's how they can get into it. So in fact, I even tell people, if you're criticizing, it means you want it. You want it, or you want something from it. And
Yeah.
there's just, your brain is creating, but your brain doesn't want you to go after it. So it makes you criticize it to put
Yeah.
the block from even having the desire
I
for
think
it.
our brains just want to protect us. Um, so I know we could talk about this for so long,
For
but
so long, yeah.
I need to wrap up. How would someone get a hold of you? I can put your information in our show notes if that
Sure.
works, but what is the best way for you?
Yeah, so I've got 3 free guides for everyone listening here. The first guide is called Prompt Engineering for Your Mind. ChatGPT, the human brain was the original ChatGPT, and we can prompt it just like ChatGPT to not only give us answers and solutions, but to help us move past our resistance. And that's the first guide. The second guide is called Build Skills and Habits in Your Sleep. It's actually, building skills and habits is hard, but we can make it easier by reprogramming our unconscious. And the second habit teaches a person to do that, or the second book. And the third book is on the topic of internal resistance. And it goes deeper into this topic, talking about how our own wants can create challenges. And it goes into some of the other reasons for resistance and why resistance stops us. But more importantly, it talks about some other tricks that I didn't get a chance to discuss here. And they can get all 3 of those guides on my website at kamknight.com. And if anybody wants to do one-on-one work with me, they can email me at coach@kamknight.com. And I've developed this really fascinating method that helps people go into their unconscious to work on the resistance directly. It's a much faster and more direct way to do it. And it's not NLP, hypnosis, or these other techniques. It's a modality that I've developed that people have found really powerful. So they can reach me at kamknight.com or at coach@kamknight.com.
Okay, and we'll post those in the show notes of those of you that need to come back and get this if you can't write it down right now.
Yeah.
But gosh, I know it's such a great topic and so needed, and it would be great for retreat leaders listening to be able to handle people at your retreats coming up with that resistance, because I'm sure we're seeing it a lot at everyone. There's got to be some suffering from that. I say suffering because our minds just want to protect us. But thanks so much for being on the show today, Kam. And I look forward to retreat leaders reaching out to you and finding out more how you can help them.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah,
I really enjoyed this. This is great.
Okay, everybody. Bye for now. Thanks for joining us on this episode of All Things Retreat. We hope you're leaving with new ideas, fresh inspiration, and the motivation to take your retreats to the next level. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. It helps us grow and reach more retreat leaders like you. And if you have any questions, topics you'd like us to cover, or just want to say hello, send us an email at info@weretreatrnr.com. Follow us on social media to stay connected and catch all the latest updates. Until next time, remember, great retreats start with great intentions. Let's make them extraordinary, one step at a time. Thinking about hosting a retreat? Before you dive in, let's make sure you're really ready. Grab your free Are You Retreat Ready checklist and find out if you've got everything in place, from your purpose and pricing to your audience and agenda. Don't guess, get clear. This quick checklist will show you exactly where you stand and what you need to make your retreat a success. Click the link below in the show notes to grab your gift and take the first step toward hosting with confidence.